back, guys. This week I am going to talk about a couple different things. I want to talk about food safety, and I also want to talk about pan searing. So I'm going to show you how to saute a chicken breast. Okay, we're going to pan sear a chicken breast. So I have everything I need here. I have my chicken breast. If I need to cut it, my cutting board. I have my seasonings here as well, and so we'll just get right to it. So for food safety reasons, again, we always want to wear our gloves when we're handling raw food. Any kind of not ready to eat food, we want to make sure we have our gloves on. Also, make sure you have it in a container of some sort so that we can transport it, and so that it's not leaking juices everywhere. So it's not leaking, blood or in this case just juices from the chicken. Take it out. We're going to put it right on our cutting board, okay? So I got my gloves on. This is fine. Now, our cutting board is contaminated, okay? If I touch my knife is not contaminated. Everything that this touches is contaminated. I wouldn't want to reach over and touch one of these towels or reach in the seasoning and touch that because I could contaminate that too as well. Make sure that your chicken is cold. If I was doing 100 pieces of this, I wouldn't take out 100 pieces of chicken and do it all at once. I would probably take it out in smaller portions so that I can make sure that my cold food stays cold, which is below 41 degrees. And whenever we cook it, we want it to be, for this, it needs to be above 165 degrees. So chicken's done at 165 degrees. Once we're done, we can hold it at above 135 degrees. Okay? So I'm just gonna season this chicken. I'm gonna cut it in half. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm just gonna season it, and then we'll cook it. I'll show you how to cook it. So, salt. If you touch the chicken, get rid of that glove. And then I'm going to use this glove since I haven't touched chicken with it yet. Use that glove to flip the chicken over. Okay. Whenever you salt, pinch it between your no, it's okay. I'm just going to tell you. Pinch it between your pointer, your index, and your thumb. Okay? And all you're going to do is rub that back and forth like that. Okay? If you rub it back and forth, this is the best way to season. You want to season high as well. It distributes it a lot more evenly. So this is it's a skill that you'll learn. It takes some practice to learn how to season properly. But make sure you're up high, moving your hand in a circular motion, and rubbing that between your fingers and your thumb. Okay? And then it'll season it nice and well. If you get seasoning on the outside, it's okay. Don't worry about it. We don't need to pick up that seasoning. Okay, so now that I've got it seasoned, we're going to sear it. But first, I want to talk a few more things about food safety. Whenever we're done with this cutting board can't be cleaned and sanitized. It needs to go through the dish. Okay, it needs to go through the dishwasher. Yes, you could clean it and sanitize it with a towel, but I want this ran through dish to ensure that it is 100% clean. Knives don't ever go through dish, so make sure you hand wash those and then sanitize them. Okay, so I can't use this for anything else. The only thing I can use this for is this chicken. Okay? Yeah. So now we're gonna sear our chicken. Okay, I've got a saute pan. You notice it's not a non-stick. I don't need a non-stick pan to sear chicken. What's gonna happen is I'm heating it up right now. I'm going to add a little oil so that it doesn't stick. If I didn't add oil, it would definitely stick. And I only need about maybe a teaspoon of oil in there. Okay? So we're going to heat this up until there's a wisp of smoke. So anytime that you're going to cook pretty much any kind of meat in a pan, you want to heat it up until you have a wisp of smoke. So I have all my utensils here that I need. I'm going to use tongs to put it in and out of the pan and to turn it over. One thing you'll want to do is have something to set the tongs in. We don't want to set them on the side of the rail because there's going to be raw chicken on it. So have something to put it in. And this goes for anything. If you're making a soup, if you're making anything that requires a utensil, have something to put it in and make sure it's metal. Don't use plastic because plastic melts. Okay, and this is around a lot of heat. So we're going to heat this up until we see a little wisp of smoke. And I know I keep saying that, but I want you guys to understand that's what we're looking for always. So I got my tongs here. I've got my chicken here. It's seasoned up. So right about now, I'm starting to see a little bit of smoke, and you don't want a lot. You want just a little bit. If you get too much smoke, it'll taste burnt. It'll have a burnt flavor. The oil will burn. So just a little bit of smoke. And if you need a reference to see if it's hot enough, you can take a little bit of water, and if it's popping, that's going to be hot enough. Okay. So go ahead and take your chicken. You're going to place it right in the middle of that pan. So, what's happening now, we're going to go ahead and turn this down a little bit, because again, we don't want that oil to burn, and we don't want that burnt flavor. What's happening now is the protein in there is kind of coagulating. What happens is it kind of tightens up. Okay, so it all seizes up real fast. While it does that seizing process, it actually sticks to the pan. So if I tried to flip this over right now, I'd have kind of a hard time because it's stuck to the pan. When I know it's ready to flip over, is whenever I can just flip it over easily without having to rip it off the pan. So if it's stuck to the pan, wait, it's not ready yet. We don't want to do this on a super high heat. We are going to get a nice caramelization on that chicken breast, but it doesn't require high heat all the time. You shouldn't see smoke coming off of this. You should be able to hear it cooking, and you should see the sides browning up. Again, whenever it releases itself from the pan, that's when I know it's ready to turn over.
You back up.
Alright, so you can see it released itself from the pan. There was no problem pulling that off. We're going to go ahead and flip it over and finish cooking it on this side. You'll see it got a nice caramelization on that outside. There's brownness on there. That's what we call caramelization. Caramelization with normal stuff is taking a sugar and turning it into caramel. On meat, it's a little bit different. We're just trying to get that nice caramel color. It gives it crunch. It gives it a texture as well. Also, there's a certain flavor that's inside of that happens whenever it caramelizes that you can't get anywhere else. So if you're cooking meat, there's hardly any time you're not going to sear it before you bake it, before you braise it. You're almost always going to sear that meat in a pan. So all we're doing here is pan searing this meat, and I'll teach you how to baste it here in just a minute. So this is going to cook until it's done. Okay, how long does it take? We'll see. Normally it takes about, I would say probably about 4 to 5 minutes to get it done. There are ways to speed this up. I could just take this just like it is and throw it in an oven, and then it has that radiant heat as well, but it's still searing it. I want to come back over.
Started to smoke when you were over there.
Alright, so now that we've got our chicken here, it's looking great. We will want to make sure that it's done. How do we check to see if it's done? There's a few ways. Once you've cooked enough chicken, you can feel it and see if it's done. The rule of thumb is kind of, if you take your finger and you put it together like this, feel there, that's going to be like rare. Okay, if you move your next finger, that's going to be like medium rare. Your next one, that's going to be more like medium to medium well. And then with your pinky, that's going to be what a well done feels like. You feel just right there on that bowl of your hand, and just touch each one together and feel that. But I don't expect you guys to be able to do that quite yet. So I want you to temp your chicken. All we're going to do is take a thermometer, and we're going to insert it into the fattest part we can find, and we're going to insert it this way. Okay, we don't want to stab into the chicken because we're not going to get to the middle. We want to make sure that we actually hit the middle of that chicken. So just kind of at an angle here, I'm going to go in. I'm going to check and make sure that comes up to 165 degrees. If it doesn't, I'm going to continue cooking. Okay? If it does, then we're gonna make sure, then we're gonna serve it. I'm gonna baste it and serve it. So we're at 166, okay? So what I'm gonna do is now I'm going to baste this, all right? What does that mean? Well, we're gonna impart some more flavor on the outside of this. All we're gonna do is I have some butter here. Go ahead and put some butter in there and let it melt down. Okay? And add some garlic, and I want to cook that garlic a little bit. Uncooked garlic is kind of spicy, and it doesn't taste that great. That's why we always want to cook our garlic. Okay, so melt that down. I also have some herbs here that I'm going to dump in, and we're going to baste this. So we want that butter to consume all of the flavor of what we just added. Okay, so let's kind of angle our plate like this. Looks like our garlic's cooking up really well. All the oils from the herbs are coming out into that butter. And we use butter instead of oil because it just tastes better. And then we're just gonna baste it over the top. Okay, so this will help the cooking process. It also adds a lot of flavor to this piece of meat. Okay, we'll baste it for just a couple more times, and we'll call it good. So if you burnt your pan, if it was burnt and brown and black inside there, you would be basting it with that burnt stuff. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I switched my pan out so that I didn't do that. So once we have it basted, we like the way it looks, we're gonna let this rest, okay? We're gonna take it off the heat, and we're gonna let it rest somewhere for at least a couple minutes. I'd like to say about 3 to 4 minutes for a piece this small before we cut it open. The reason is, again, like I said, those proteins they come together real tight. We need to let those proteins relax and come back out. Whenever they come together real tight on the outside of this piece of meat, it actually forces all the moisture to go run into the middle of the meat. So if you were to take that out right now and cut it, all the juices that were in there would run out, and it would be a dry piece of chicken. So let it rest. It's the most important step whenever you're sautéing or cooking any type of meat, is to make sure you let it rest. And I can't stress that enough. The bigger the piece of meat, the longer you let it rest. So if you cook a roast, I'm sorry, not a roast, but if you cook a ribeye in the oven, then you would want to let that rest for probably 30 minutes because you're going to cook that for hours. Okay, so we've let it rest for about 3 or 4 minutes now. Now it's time to cut and serve it. So if we were in a restaurant, you normally wouldn't serve a whole breast like this. You would actually cut it up and make it easier for your guests to eat. Again, whenever you're cooking for guests or people that are paying for your food, you don't want them to have to work for their food. So we're going to slice it up and make it a little easier. So we're going to cut this on a bias, and what that means is we are going to, instead of cutting straight, we're actually going to have an angle to it. Okay? So it could be an angle like this, or it could be an angle like that. Okay? So this would be a bias cut. This also would be a bias cut. And I'll show you why we cut it like this. So cut all the way through on that bias. I can show you eagle claw. So the reason we cut this on a bias is so that we can fan this out. It also makes it look like it's a whole lot more, so you can save a little bit of food cost as well. Again, whenever you're working with chicken, this is a cooked product, and you don't need to sanitize this. You don't need to wash this in the dishwasher. We can clean and sanitize this and come back to it and reuse it for something else. Keep any product that's in the cooler below 41 degrees. Anything that needs to be cold below 41. If it's hot, it needs to be above 135. Some things like chicken have certain requirements that you have to hit. For example, you have to cook this to 165 degrees, and then you can hold it at 135.